Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
I'm John Boylan. I'm recently come in to help coordinate some of the Studio 99 projects. And you will probably see more of me. This afternoon we have Laurie Frick, who is a data artist, has been working as an artist for, I guess, almost
10 years.
10 years, and deals a lot with data about the self and self-tracking data. Lives in Austin, works in New York, and recently was featured in an article in The Atlantic, which I believe, I don't know if that was in the invitation or not, but it's easy to find. It was a good portrait. In any case, I'm not going to stand up here too long, and we'll just say, welcome to Laurie.
Have you ever thought about what's known about you? Not just if you Google yourself and it's like, right, here's what's public, but what's, some of the juicy stuff. Like every time you've ever used your credit card, or every video you've ever watched, or maybe every time you swiped your ID here on campus, every single time, it was I work with self-tracking data, and it was a couple years ago, and I thought, all right, what's really known about me? Privacy was starting to really heat up, and I started to make a list, in real quantified self fashion. I scored it from 1 to 5, depending how public, how private, and hundreds. I mean, I was a little hundreds and hundreds of things, and every couple days I'd think of something else. Recently I realized Amazon knows how fast I read a book. They know if I cheat and if I read the end, right? And so you can kind of get creeped out by this, but I actually looked at this list and I thought, it's kind of a more compelling, more complex, more thorough view of myself than I can even remember. And so it's some of this that's caught me to really see that maybe this data, that everything that's collected about you, all this surveillance, all this stuff, can start to be a way to see the hidden part of you. And so I'm on a mission to get you to think about your data in a totally new way. So I've got 20 minutes to convince you. And let me just start by explaining I'm a data artist and I make hand-built work from data. So I count it, I measure it, I chop it up. A lot of it starts, digitally. I use data visualiz tools. I'm super hyper organized. And I have a background in tech. I have a whole nother life. I have been to this campus in another life. I have pitched Bill Gates in another life. I have been here. So let me just tell you a story. And it's kind of the story of how I came to this. And it all started with time. It was a few years ago and felt like something had really shifted. Everything started to feel like all these little bits of time. And there was a writer, Linda Stone, and she describes it as continuous partial attention. And it really describes like everything was in these tiny little chunks. And so I was starting to make work based on that little bits of imagined time, forward, backward. And I always thought like the perfect painting was 24 hours. Right, if you think about it, like it's a metaphor for a day, these big quiet areas of sleep, and then you have this like perfect, and then you have this ugly argument, and then you have the boring part while you're sitting in your car. And I knew that if you really want to study something, you need to measure it. So I thought, all right, I'm going to buckle down and really measure my own time. And I started, and I don't know if anybody, it's really hard. And it was really amateurish attempt. So I Googled it, how do you measure? And I found Ben Lipkowitz. And Ben has been measuring every bit of his time. Every one of those horizontals is 24 hours. And he's put, since 2005, he's put it all online. And it was like, holy shit. This looks exactly like the way I imagined time, all these little bits. I mean, it turns out I've now become friends with Ben. He's a developer, his parents are neuroscientists. He has a whole theory about why he's doing this. But I didn't even hesitate. I scraped his data and I started to make drawings from it, based on real time. And then I started to chop it up, right? It's color coded. And, at the same time, I mean, I really love this, but Marco. But I really wanted to measure something of me. And I knew that, right, measuring time is really, hard. But at the same time, I had this consumer tech, new products background. And I thought, all the sensors, this is all going to get much easier. And my very next, I bought a Zeo, which, so sad, they've gone out of business. It's a little dry EEG sensor, and it measures your sleep. And I thought, this is so easy. I can measure all my time, right, when I'm asleep in bed. I don't actually have to do anything. And I was really surprised as I started measuring sleep. So each one of these verticals is a night of sleep. I mean, the first thing was, sleep is not so different, waking, sleeping. It's all in these little 5 and 10-minute bits. It's really similar. I'd always heard that sleep cycles were these big 90-minute chunks. It turns out, no. Waking, sleeping, not so different. And I was also really, I was kind of taken aback. I mean, you don't really know. It's one of these hidden things about you. You go to bed 11 o'clock, you wake up at 7, you think you got 8 hours sleep, but you don't remember. I mean, I don't remember anything. And, it was this moment where I'd always thought I was this really good sleeper. And it was a moment where I realized I wasn't the person I thought I was. It turns out I'm a terrible sleeper. And I was like, I mean, it was right, I'm measuring, it's real data, it's about me, and it turns out I'm bad at something, which is sort of not my nature. I was like, I'm accomplished, I could get. But it was a moment where data was kind of, you have to really confront it. And it was sort of this weird conflict I was sorting out. And so then I got really, really, really interested in sleep and realized everything good happens when you sleep. People talk about, I'm a power sleeper, I only need 4 hours. It's horrible. Everything good. If you're sick, it's when you get better. If you're on a diet, it's when you metabolize carbs. If you're a little kid, it's when you grow. It's how you reorganize long-term memory. I mean, everything good happens when you sleep. So I was pretty into it. And I started to really come up with this whole system for sleep. So I created these rules. So I had a rule system. So red is the deep sleep, and yellow is awake, and pink is REM sleep. And I took all the light sleep, which is really trash sleep, folded it up out of the way, got rid of it. And I put so I had all these rules, like little art algorithms, and I put it in a show in Los Angeles. And it was kind of a big moment because it got a big, fat review in the LA Times. And then it got picked up in New Scientist and in Gadget and Boing Boing, and it went all over the net, and all these reviews, and it was zipping around. And the guys at Zeo, that made this little sleep device, they saw this, they saw the reviews online, and they send me a note, Laurie, love your work. What can we do to help you? And I said, send me more data. And it was the first time that I could compare my sleep. So before I had it vertical, I've switched it to horizontal. Every single one of those horizontal is a night of sleep. So it's like a month of sleep from each. And it was the first time I could see other people's sleep. And I realized they were very individual. It's like a fingerprint. And so you're actually looking, purple is the really good stuff. That's deep sleep. Orange is waking up. And you can start to see people have a very, look at this poor guy. Really, it's like, and so I asked the research guys at Zeo, and they said, oh, yeah. Very identifiable. Sleep is very unique. I can see your sleep. I know exactly who that is. And, it was funny. It was right about this time I'm wearing this thing on my forehead. I have 1,000 nights of sleep data. I'm wearing this thing on my forehead, and I didn't want to be the only one that was jumping into bed every night. So I got one for my husband, ding. And he goes, I'm a terrible sleeper. I have insomnia. And he wears it the very first night, and he scores 140. I didn't even think it went over 100. I'm scoring like in the 60s. And right, so it turns out, he sleeps great most of the time, and every now and then it's horrible. But he only remembered the bad. And I thought, that's so him. And I was like, that's so him. Right, so he has this huge standard deviation. I have a very narrow standard deviation. And I thought, it's not only like a fingerprint, what if it actually is measuring his personality? So I doubled down and decided, all right, this is so cool. I mean, I'm going to measure everything. So I really started measuring things like the sleep, like the ZEO. If I could live in the future, particularly things that are really easy. It's living in the time where it's just ambient data. Things are going to be collected about you, Internet of Things, right? Everything that I'm doing is just going to be automatically. So how can I live in that world? So I got a Wi-Fi scale. I spit in a tube. I got my DNA, right? I log all the time on my computer. I put apps on my phone. I mean, anything I could find. And this is sort of a short list. Otherwise, I look crazy. And I decided to use myself for research. And really pay attention, right? I'm measuring this, how does it feel? And there's a tradition of artists both using themselves for their work, but, sometimes artists have they've anticipated a scientific breakthrough, where art precedes science. And I have a fantasy that some of this is going to really prove out. But artists can also imagine themselves through research. They get to make stuff up. That's their job. And so I decided to really watch, notice, pay attention, and I studied patterns in the data. Right, so this is, it's human data pulled out, and I started to see it was sort of these rhythms of me, almost like a neural Fibonacci. Right, the patterns, the proportions of me played back to me. And at the beginning, I was really convinced I'm going to, cause and effect. I'm going to be able to correlate this many steps. I slept this much. I weigh this much. Even if there was a lag effect, I was pretty sure I was going to figure it all out. It turns out, humans are really noisy, like really noisy data objects. So I kind of let go of the cause and effect. It's very hard. And I thought, well, let me just look at the patterns. Let me just look at the patterns themselves. It's me reflected back to me, and I started to think of them as data portraits. I kind of jokingly call them data selfie. And so I'm really, and I realized it's sort of this, there's a familiarity, there's a fluency to it, and I started to see the data, okay, pay attention, and think of them in spaces. Right? What if we lived with these patterns? What if they covered the walls that we live like intelligent wallpaper? What if our patterns, the texture of that pattern is something we spend time with? It's not so hard. You could, right? Laser cutters, 3D printers, little CNC machines, a little Rocco vacuum on your walls. This is a big XY axis. I started to think about art in terms of texture, the physicality of it, and I imagined them recyclable. It's kind of ephemeral. It can update. It kind of slowly goes against the wall and, ends up in the little bit bucket. Recycles, comes back. But I really thought there was something important about getting the actual texture of them. And there was something about this that just had this familiarity. There's something about our patterns. We repeat the patterns. I think the patterns of our behavior are beautiful. We go the same places all the time. I look at the log data, I have this intense period in the morning when I'm online, and then I have these longer stretches in the afternoon. People always say to me, Laurie, my patterns of my travel are so boring. I just go to work, I just go home, maybe the grocery, I know. But those intense areas are actually the good parts. And so for months, I have this cut, drawn patterns in my studio. I mean, the walls are filled with this stuff. And I realized I really liked it. It felt like me. I mean, it felt recognizable, it felt human, it felt personal, it felt soothing, it had this comfort quality, it was recognizable. And I thought, maybe that's the point. Maybe this data is a way to see this hidden part, like sleep. It's a way to see this hidden part of you, the part that you just don't see, you don't notice. I mean, you're kind of trained to ignore yourself. And maybe there's this idea that the hidden patterns of you, right, all this data that's going to be collected, that's collected now, right, all this data of us gets played back to us, abstracted, and it becomes a shortcut to mindfulness. It's kind of this crazy way. It's like a technology-boosted immune system. Your brain doesn't know the difference between meditative self-reflection and the intake of a data selfie. It just knows that what it's seeing is somehow playing back this sense of self. It's feeding the human loop. It's you, it's grounded. And so I imagine, right, there's a whole connection, there's a huge scientific work around meditation and immune systems and how, immune systems are fed. I think in the future it's going to be a really, really big deal. And so, along the way, people are buying this. They're, right, this stuff's in galleries. It's, people are taking it home, and it's kind of crazy because it's my data. But sometimes it's in this case, it's the lobby. It's actually a team of developers, and it's all the chat metadata of a group that works together. And you're looking at, in the lobby, it's 24 hours, all of the chat sessions, the timestamp, and the length of the message. So all the developers are yellows and oranges. All the designers are shades of blue. The management are shades of gray, right? So it's it's kind of the interactions. It's like the human data of a group of people. But I realized in doing this that it got people to really look. I try to think that art makes data sticky. It gets people to look at it much, much longer. And, I realized that these patterns, I mean, they mean something to me, but I realized they mean something to other people too. And so I worked on and launched an iPhone app. The team, the lobby, the guys, they helped, so we made a trade. So they worked, it was a digital shop. And FrickBits is, it's a way to take I was kind of an experiment. It was a way to take back your data and turn it into something meaningful. I mean, for the most part, there's all this data collected about us, but we never get to see it. We don't know. It doesn't come back to us. And, so for FrickBits, it's live. It's in the Apple Store. It takes your location data, keeps track of it. You get extra bits for the places that you live. All the intense colors are for the places that you go all the time. And it uses that art algorithm, the rules, some of those rules that I started creating when I did the sleep, right? Sort of assigning colors and sort of coming up with an algorithmic way to produce art. And it was, so at this moment I kind of paused and I thought, why? I mean, I'm working like crazy on this. And I thought, why am I doing it? Laurie, you're putting little, I've got a Fitbit on, you're putting these little sensors all over you. You're trying to figure out who you are. I mean, I'm using these external means to try to figure out who I am. At artist residencies, we would sit around and analyze other artists' work to try to sort of decode them or analyze them. I mean, this actually works for you guys too. Looking at what people work on, it says a lot about them. And then I thought, I'm using all these external means to figure out who am I? But I think we all do this. Use something external to figure out who we are. I completely changed jobs, but yeah, You move. You get a new place. You get a new apartment. You get a new boyfriend. You change cities. I mean, you're trying to use these external means to try to figure out who you are. Do I like it? Do they like me? Do I like this new place? I mean, you can't know. And I thought, well, maybe this is it. It's the way data starts to see this hidden part of us, a way to reveal the part that's really hard to know about ourselves. There's this really, really wonderful book called Strangers to Ourselves, Timothy Wilson, and he describes, right, the you, the other you, the you that your friends get to see, the one that you don't get to see. And so you think, well, maybe, right, maybe, what would, so maybe, all this data comes back to me. What would my, right, what would my data say about, right? What would it say about you? And you start thinking, all right, what if I got all my data back? What would my sleep? What would it look like, right? Is it going to be like my husband, right, who swings wildly? Or what would your data, right, if it sort of measures something about you, what would it say about you? And I just think it's this really compelling story, this really interesting possibility to use my data to understand and answer this question that I've been trying to sort with. It's, who am I? So what if I could figure out a way, right, take back my data? What if I could get all my data and not just understand who I am, but the possibility of who I can be? It's like, how am I feeling? Am I up? Am I down? Do I have my mojo today? I'm super, super interested in data's ability to predict. Not just how am I feeling now and the data showing me, here's my stress level at this moment, but how am I going to feel tomorrow at 11 o'clock? It's almost like this weird smart drug where what if I can know that at a certain time in the future I'm really, really on? And I just am so curious about what data could be, and I start to think of it as this irresistible possibility. It's funny, human data, the Fitbit, all these companies that are doing self-tracking data, they keep describing it in terms of health or fitness. It's very Calvinist, really purposeful. What's the purpose of this data? We want to get people to walk more. I mean, but I don't think it's about that. I think that human data is going to be, and it really is about identity. Who am I? So if data is a way to get to know ourselves, if data is the way that I'm going to figure out who I am, why am I running from it? Why would I hide? I say, take back your data, turn it into art. Thank you.
Do you have questions?
I hope. This is where I was like, I'm dying to talk to you guys about this.
So you alluded a little bit to cause and effect, but then you sort of dropped a little bit. Do you think doing all this work and looking at your data has changed you? In other words, has changed the data? So do you feel like there's been a feedback loop, or has it literally just been?
No, I think it's a fair question, right? If you measure yourself, what changes? I mean, one of the things, because I've measured so many things for so long, I don't stress over it short term. But the thing there's a few things that I can tell my behavior. It's like stepping on a scale every day. You manage your weight just by having the data. Just the presence of the data makes a difference. One of the things I learned about sleep, it's kind of anti-intuitive. The earlier you go to bed, the better you sleep. People think if I'm really tired and I go to bed late, I'm going to sleep better. You actually sleep better if you go to bed early. I also know just kind of intuitively now, if I stand longer during the day, if I stand in my studio and I stand, not only can I get 10,000 steps in, but I sleep better. I mean, so there's a level of self-knowledge that you just sort of start to intuitively understand, and I'm not sort of consciously, writing down, I'm more productive, but I think the knowledge and the exposure to the data subtly affects you. But I understand, but I honestly don't think that's the point as much as the sense that art can show you back your data in a way that you care about.
I have an extension of that question. If feedback is a big part of this experience, and we see something like a wallpaper, which is relatively fixed, do you think you'll expand into like animation or other forms that change, so that there could be a kind of feedback in something that's not many months, or iterating on many different data snapshots, but doing something a little bit more continuously?
Right, so how do you get the data to actually be real time and update? Part of me wants to do that with physical work, right? So the physicality of it. I mean, I'm really, I'm kind of a mind that it's like a shortcut just to go to a pixelated screen. But if there was a way to maybe project it on something bumpy, or have a way to have the physicality of the work updated all the time. I'm serious. I think it should be, recent and current, but I'm still figuring out a way to make that physical and make it, I mean, could it be interactive and move? And absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I noticed that a lot of the pieces that you showed have a very judicious use of color, if I could use that term. And also numbers appear a lot. And I'm kind of curious where those come from in your work.
Well, some of the pieces are based on walking, tracking, and I'll make drawings as I go, and I'll look at the Fitbit and what, it's like steps from that time or numbers. I also have this weird sense that the things that you see all the time, some things you forget, some things you remember, it sort of seeps in. And so then, the numbers come from that, kind of the amount of stuff that you're exposed to and the parts of it that you actually remember. Mm-hmm. I mean, I actually think I'm making stuff pretty bright. I mean, I'm trying to inject as much color as people can stand in the pieces.
Yeah, they vary. I mean, this, like the background piece on the wall and some of the other ones in the lobby and so forth were very, very colorful. But then some of them, especially with wood, I noticed it was
where you sort of
very
back off a
subtle.
little bit.
Yeah, there was just a little bit here and there. I was just kind of curious what your inspiration and was that coming from something in the data to you, or was that coming from how you felt about it?
Well, one of the pieces with the data, they were about time, and it was winter. Sometimes it's about place, and the color relates to the sense of time of that place. But I also have this theory. I mean, a lot of color is, what people like about color is based on the fluency of what people have seen before. I mean, people's music tastes and their food tastes come from what they've tasted or heard as really young. So I thought that, color taste comes from what you've experienced and seen. And I started realizing that super saturated, photoshopped color, so much media that is so bright. There's so much media now that's really not nature colors. It's just way more. And I almost can't get enough. In fact, sometimes I'll make stuff and then I'll have to paint over the top of it or take it back or do something to dial it back, because I like color that's I want to take the saturation knob and take it to 11. So, yes.
You spoke about how data awareness is a shortcut for mindfulness, and it seems like you've learned how to sort of read data and how that expresses how you feel.
Yeah.
But you must have also done that relationally with your husband and with other people, seeing their data, and sort of that must have influenced how you interface with them. And I wondered if you could speak a bit to that. Like when you saw other people's data, how did it influence your thoughts about them?
Oh, now I'm getting sort of this Freudian shrink insight to who they are. Yeah. Somebody asked me once, it was like, all right, if I'm really super stressed, can I see somebody else's data to calm me down? Or there's also the question of, if you're really mad and the person that you're talking to, sort of meets you with that same, you sort of calm down, as opposed to somebody patronizing you. It's something. So so I've always thought I don't know the answers to this. Is what part of that experience or feedback to yourself do you want to get like for like or like for different? I think the question of looking at other people's data you know, I'm not, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's a fair question. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's sort of like the answer to the universe. So some of it, I honestly, I don't.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
not
looking
sure.
at your data, and it's fascinating, but it's very interesting.
I mean, the truth is, I've probably spent. I mean, here's for example, Ben Lipkowitz. There's one guy, and I probably spent hundreds of hours with his data. And I've gotten so I really like his data. Well, it varies. It goes for years and years. There was this whole one section where, because he sleeps on a 26-hour clock, so his patterns go on a diagonal, which is interesting. And then there was this one chunk for about 6 months that he was getting up at the same time. He's a software developer, and so when I saw him one day, I said, "Did you get a job? What happened then? Why are you getting?" And he goes, "No, I was on a bike trip. I had to get up when the sun got up. I was sleeping in a tent, So there's something about him, and he has an interesting variety to it. And then I've been doing these pieces based on time use data, and they're anonymous people. And some of it, I go through them, and it's like, oh no, I don't like this guy. I start looking, it's like, ugh. So there is a response to some of the time-based data, and it's interesting because I think to me, I'm sitting here sort of answering it, like, I haven't thought about this before. There's a certain amount of variety that makes the person interesting. And maybe the thing, like, you marry your opposite, because I'm pretty steady, and the thing with my husband, it's like, oh yeah, love him. yeah.
I almost feel a self-help book coming on.
Oh God, no, don't make me. I think this, because I struggle really hard to not step into new age crap. I mean, I really, because I think that's hooey. Yeah, but I think there's a scientific connection here.
But no. I didn't mean that negatively.
No, it's like, please don't take me there.
But what I do mean is the idea that it's almost like
Therapeutic.
There would be rules for what you want your data to look like. In terms of, you just said something about variety. Does variety along certain axes indicate someone who is better able, say, to deal with everyday life, or something like that? Again, I'm not suggesting the book, but it's that idea of
like a self. You have but heart rate variability. Do people? Yeah. You actually want highly variable. So it could be that what makes you human has a certain amount of variety in terms of time, heart rate, breathing.
But you can also work in other parameters, variety, intensity in certain cases. I mean, if you go through life and there's no fluctuation in your data at all, then what kind of person?
You're a robot.
Yeah, effectively, yeah.
You're a robot. Well, okay. You know what I love about this group? Usually, because I talk about this a lot, and usually, the very first groups are like, "Oh my God, we are not data. We can't reduce humans. There's the mystery of being human." But nobody's asked that. This group is like data. You're like, oh yeah. Well, because people will say, because you can be. I think we are going to be statistically understood. I think there's a point where we will be known. Yeah. Yeah, it's what you're asking. Yeah, there's going to be norms. Yeah. Yes.
This is kind of what I was headed where my mind was going, which is like, I'm curious if any of this, you're into your own data and you find it super interesting. I wonder if there are cases where it's telling you things you wish you didn't know about yourself. I mean, because there's things like we certainly have to. This is probably the response you were alluding to, which is people are like, we need a certain fiction about ourselves in order to maintain our sanity. But and so sometimes the truth is too stark. And too just kind of just depressing. I watch TV way more than I thought I did.
Well, I started tracking my time, like really track. I turned a couple apps on my phone, and I had manic time running on my laptop, and then I started keeping a little grid, and I was trying to get at things I did simultaneously. And one of the things that did surprise me, because people always talk about, oh God, you look at your phone too much. I realized most of the time on my phone, I was reading stuff. That maybe actually I felt better about it. Mm-hmm. But I think there is, like, you don't hear your own heartbeat. You barely, I think what you see in the mirror is not there's all kinds of things that you just cope with. Just yeah. Yeah, please.
Kind of back to the work side of it a little bit. I'm curious, in this image here and in some of the others in your presentation, this has both, this happens to have both, but a lot of the work that you showed, you have either color or extrusions of some sort, or they're coming off of a surface of a wall typically. And then sometimes you have like these frames that you're seeing through that have data punched through, or that
Negative, positive.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, like, what leads you one direction or another, and how do you think about those two? Kind of, they're pretty different expressions, right? I'm just curious how you think about that.
Yeah. So the thing that makes it live in the world of art for me is there's the experience of the data and then the data itself. And there's data viz, right, that tends to take the data and represent it really accurately. And I try to stay, I mean, I showed a few examples that I actually work from like the real data, but I try to find something in the experience. Like when I did the walking, it was the time of year, what the color of the light was. Sometimes I wore these selfie cameras and did pictures as I went and looked at all the images. You can wear these little, you can run a time lapse. I wore my iPhone around my neck for a while. I would look for something in it. It's funny because, the sleep, I took the bad sleep and folded it out of the way and made it missing. But then other times I would make, like the time with stuff that would poke out would be something that I felt had more emotion. So, I mean, I used the same metaphor to mean completely different things. But I was trying to get at, like, it's almost like you've got color, size. So I was trying to find more dimensionality to play with.
Is there anything that leads you, along those lines, that leads you towards, if you will, the negative space of these sort of frames and the panels that you look through? Is there anything that typically leads you that way, or is that just whatever the spirit, however the spirit moves you into what you're trying to express?
A lot of it was because I belong to a laser cooperative, so I get like endless amounts of laser time. And so I just experimented with laser cutting. And could I draw with a laser cutter? And they're handmade with a laser cutter. I don't have a great, you can tell I can't figure, I don't know. I mean, one of the things that I did figure out is I've tried to sort out how to represent bad data. It's, right, it's different than just, it's something you don't want to know, but every now and then things are not okay. Or I measured for 1.5 years if I had an upset stomach. 1 was good, 5 was a bad, and you just score it every day. And, I went back and looked at the data and I thought, how do I represent those 5s? And I took the data and stacked it, and when something went bad, because I'm that really tidy person, I would let it spill out. And I thought, if it was live and I was getting the data real time, I probably could make my stomach feel better in order to stack that stuff up neat. My desire for neatness was so high. That's why when I looked at your office, Ash was like, oh, I'm so horrified. My house is clean. And I thought, it's kind of a secondary way to represent data, to give it to them, not just smack them like you're bad, but it's messy. And if you want to clean it up, you might have the dial to switch it the other way. Much too neat.
I'm a piler, so.
Well, exactly.
So and I know where everything is.
But that is memory, because memory has a chronological.
No, as soon as I organize it, I don't know where it is.
No, because chronologically, it's historically time-based.
Yeah. It's just bananas. So weird.
And the stuff on the floor?
Yeah, I know where everything is. Because even that has a location, and it has something associated with that location.
You've read about the rats in the maze that store location-based where they are. This is in your little neurotransmitters.
It's like the rats of NIM.
So actually, that kind of relates to my question. It feels like, maybe at least when you started, a lot of this was representing your data to yourself. But when you think about the space of like data viz on one side and something really abstractly art on the other, there's a big trade-off between how interpretable it is.
Right.
And I'm wondering if you thought about like, yeah, how would you present somebody's data to them based on their particular personality, right? So, if I commissioned you to do something with my data and you knew me, what were the things that you might think about or vary?
It's like the art algorithm of the future, right? It's back that art can be literally, could be coded to be a learning algorithm with a set of rules that I don't even have to intervene, right? It makes art for you. What does it measure?
In these particular instances, at least for yourself, like, are there things like, well, you mentioned one, this sort of spilling out effect. Are there other things like that you kind of coded for your understanding?
It's almost what you're trying to get at. It's like the amount of humanness. How much hand, how much edge, where do it's in that super messy, super tidy, right? It's sort of how mechanical, how handmade, that's some of it. I had this project that I started working on, and it's partway through, was to be able to look at the person and gather data about them that then would feed into the algorithm. The speed that they walked, how fast they signed their name, the pitch of their voice. I thought there was something interesting in their basic proportions. You can measure like people's basic, sort of just the amount of this to the amount of this based on the proportions of their hands. Hands have a lot to say about people. You can start, it was like, all right, what are the things that I can very objectively measure about you repeatedly and use that to feed into the algorithm? And some of it's personal, the speed thing or the pitch thing, and it was like the colors that they wore, and what are the things you can start to gather about somebody that are unconscious choices about them but are very insightful. So how do you start to make yours? I also imagine in the future, you could have like the super abstraction or the super realism. You could start to make stuff. I don't want any. It's like the filter in Photoshop, hyper sharp, a little bit fuzzy. I mean, I think there's something in that. I don't have all the, and some of this I don't even figure out in my own head until later. I realized there was something that was causing me to make something in a certain way that felt right, and then I sort of analyzed why. As artists will tell you, sometimes they figure it out while they're making it or soon after they made it, and they don't exactly know why.
So have you done this for your husband?
Made some? Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what has been his response and interaction with it?
He likes some better than others. What's his interaction? Yeah, I did a lot of his sleep stuff. It's possible he didn't tell me exactly. I'm sitting here thinking. He goes, "Honey, I liked it. Thanks." He knows enough not to, say too much, maybe.
Well, I guess to combine those two questions then, when you did do someone, in a sense your husband was Neil in a way. You produced something for someone else.
Yeah. And then I sold it.
But did it look like...
You laugh. It's all gone.
Yeah. Were there different colors you used, different textures, different materials?
Mm-hmm. You're right. There were. His colors were duller. Not duller because he's dull, but he doesn't. No. He wears, tan and gray is sort of a common color. Yeah, I didn't make him as bright. You're right. I didn't. Some of it, I don't even think I thought about it.
But it still came out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah.
So, have you thought about using government open data to do art based on cities, like 911 calls records, like all the info that is publicly available?
Oh, yeah. Because I really like data that's sort of human. base, right? So that's sort of that about individual people. Can you create portraiture of individual? Because once you start going into the land of data, it's bottomless.
Yeah, but like cities have identities and like vibes that you could sort of picture.
Well, it was partly why I started using time use data from timeuse.org, and then I wrote to the people at the University of Oxford, and they have a time use database, and I've been gathering data that was anonymously gathered about how people spent their time. But I haven't looked, I mean, like 911 calls, yeah, I haven't.
And
You can, I mean, part of it is, the data is overwhelming.
Yep.
So I think we'll go with Banko's question and then maybe.
That's great.
So when I look at the physical manifestation of the data that you made, obviously there's great many artistic and aesthetic qualities to it. Do you, and as you're creating it, do you ever I don't even know how to say that. Do you ever worry about how much meta information the person needs to know to understand the piece? Because there's obviously, if you go to a space and you look at this, you can just think about it purely from artistic perspective. I don't know that it's about data. And do you, like, how much of the design goes into that direction? How much do you think you gain by knowing the meta information? This is really my sleeping data.
Yeah.
And my secondary question is, like, how do you actually convey to people, or do you convey to people that it is your sleeping data?
No, it's a really good question, because I have a show up right now in New York, and I put legends in the show for one of the first times. And I used to put little clues, because I was at the beginning, I thought, it's enough that I know what it is, and I would name it something that would kind of be a clue, or I would put dates in it. I mean, I would do little things because I thought it was kind of cheeky for me to know what it was, but not so much for other people. And now I've decided to be a lot more straight up. I've got, I do these 7 days of time use made out of leather, and then I little hand draw. I give them exactly what the colors are of what each of the categories of time. I show what's happening in the thing. I thought it would ruin it because it's like ka-chunk, ka-chunk. And actually people like, so it seems to help. So I've started creating these little legends. And what's kind of weird, because as I look at maps or other kinds of things, I always read the legend. I want to know. So maybe I've decided that the legends are kind of part of it, and I've started to explain more. Yeah, it's an excellent question. These are like little baseball cards. They're business cards, but honestly, think of it as more like a little party favor. It's like you get a little, it's like, they come in different ones. There's a ton of them. If you rent, yeah, collect them all.
Sure, thank you all. Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you. This was great. Thank you.